Welcome! In this demo, I'll walk through how Connect to AD is set up and how it works. We'll go step by step, from setting up connections to defining rules and mappings, and then previewing and running a sync. At a high level, Connect to AD automates user provisioning, updates, and deprovisioning by reading employee data from UKG and applying rules in Active Directory. As data changes in UKG, Connect to AD evaluates those changes and determines whether a user needs to be created, updated, or disabled. All of this behavior is driven by flexible expression-based rules, which means you can adapt it to how your organization works. For this demo, my goal is to sync UKG employees into specific org units and show provisioning, updates, and deprovisioning in real time. I'll create a new environment, configure the connections, define the rules and mappings, and then preview and run the sync to show the results in Active Directory. I'm starting by creating a new environment called demo.com. An environment is a complete, self-contained setup that includes the connections, rules, mappings, notifications, and scheduling that control how UKG data flows into Active Directory. In real-world deployments, admins often create multiple environments, one per domain, one per major business unit, and often one specifically for testing. This makes it easier to test changes safely and to manage more complex Active Directory setups without everything being tied together. Next, let's set up the connection to UKG. Connect to AD authenticates to UKG using a service account with permission to read employee data. Once that account is created, we enter the API host, username, password, and API keys here. After entering the details, I'll click the green check mark to verify that the connection is working. For a detailed walkthrough of this step, you can watch a dedicated tutorial by clicking on the card on your screen or the link in the description. Now let's move on to the Active Directory connection. Connect to AD uses a network account that has permission to interact with Active Directory. The connection itself is defined using an LDAP path, which lets us point to a domain or even a specific org unit. For more details on this step, click the card to watch our in-depth tutorial. You'll also find a link in the description. Once the connection is verified, we can move on to rules. Rules control how Connect to AD behaves. They determine how employees are linked to users, which employees are synced, and how new accounts are created. I'll start with the link rule because it ties everything together. The link rule tells Connect to AD how a UKG employee links to an Active Directory user. Most customers choose to link using employee number because it's unique to each employee and doesn't typically change. While you can link using values like a username or the employee's email address, those often change over time and can introduce risk. Once this link is in place, Connect to AD can determine whether a user already exists and just needs an update, or whether a brand new account needs to be created. The employee filter determines which UKG employees are included in the sync. This is especially helpful during setup, as it lets you start small, maybe one department, a single location, or even just a few test employees based on employee number. Once everything looks good, you can expand the filter to include additional employees or remove it entirely.
When provisioning is disabled, Connect to AD won't create new users. It will only update existing users. When provisioning is enabled, Connect to AD automatically creates user accounts in Active Directory for new employees. As soon as a new employee appears in UKG and meets the provisioning conditions we've defined, Connect to AD creates their account automatically using your standards. This gives you clear control over how much responsibility Connect to AD has in your environment.
Connect to AD provides full control over provisioning user accounts exactly as you need. The user logon name conditions define how usernames are created in Active Directory. You can specify one or more username formats based on your organization's standards, such as firstname.lastname, first initial last name, or any other combination that makes sense for you. Username formats are evaluated in priority order. If the first format is already in use or unavailable, Connect to AD automatically tries the next option and continues until it finds an available username. This built-in conflict handling means you don't have to worry about duplicate usernames or failed provisioning. The account is created successfully, following your standards without any manual intervention. The end result is consistent, predictable usernames across your directory, even as your organization grows. The user logon name suffix determines the domain portion of the UPN. When an account is provisioned, the suffix is appended to the username to form the full UPN. This helps maintain consistency across your directory as new accounts are created. The password rule determines how the default password is set when a user account is created. In most cases, customers choose to have Connect to AD automatically generate a random password for each new user, but you can also use an expression to define a password that meets your organization's password policies. This gives you flexibility to align with your security and onboarding processes. Field mappings control how employee information from UKG is written into Active Directory user attributes. This is where we decide exactly what data goes where. For example, we can map an employee's first and last name from UKG into the corresponding fields in Active Directory. The same values can also be combined to build a single display name. We can also map organizational details like department and job title, keeping Active Directory aligned with how employees are defined in UKG. When those values change in UKG, the updates are automatically reflected in Active Directory, no manual updates required. In addition to simple one-to-one mappings, we can apply conditional logic when needed, such as writing a start date when an employee becomes active, or a termination date when their status changes to terminated. Connect to AD supports a wide range of UKG data, including standard fields, user-defined fields, and platform config fields. Once mappings are in place, everything stays continuously in sync as changes occur in UKG. There are a few advanced field mappings I want to highlight. They go beyond basic attributes like name or department and help manage more advanced identity behavior. First is Manager. This mapping keeps reporting relationships in sync. When an employee's manager changes in UKG, that update is automatically reflected in Active Directory. Next is Enable Account. This mapping controls whether the Active Directory account is enabled or disabled based on UKG data and plays a big role in the deprovisioning process. If an employee is active in UKG, their account is enabled. If an employee is terminated in UKG, their Active Directory account is immediately disabled, helping ensure access is removed at the right time. Then there's Container. This mapping determines where the user account lives in Active Directory. For example, terminated employees can automatically be moved to a disabled user's OU. For active employees, placement can be driven by attributes such as department, with sales employees placed in a sales OU, IT employees in an IT OU, and so on, all driven by UKG data. Finally, we have Mail. This mapping manages the user's email address and, when configured, can also support bidirectional sync. When Active Directory is set as the source of truth, updates to the mail attribute are written back to the corresponding email field in UKG. Together, these advanced field mappings help ensure that manager relationships, account state, org unit placement, and email identity are kept consistent and up to date automatically based on what's happening in UKG. Group mappings control which security or distribution groups a user belongs to in Active Directory. If you're familiar with Entra ID dynamic groups, this works similarly. Instead of manually managing group membership, we define simple conditions that determine whether a user should be added or removed from a group. Each group membership is driven by a true or false expression. For example, if an employee is active in UKG, add them to the active users group. If an employee is active in UKG and works in the sales department, add them to the sales group. If an employee is terminated, remove them from all groups. As employee data changes in UKG, Connect to AD automatically reevaluates these conditions. If someone changes departments, their group memberships update automatically. If they're no longer active, they're removed from the appropriate groups without manual effort. This makes it easy to keep access aligned with job role, department, and status, while eliminating the need to manage group membership manually. Notifications keep teams informed about what's changing as Connect to AD runs. They can be triggered when users are created, updated, or disabled, and can also provide a summary of what happened in the sync. Notifications are fully configurable. You decide when they are sent, who receives them, and exactly what information is included. For each event type, you can control the recipients, the subject line, and the message body. This ensures the right people are informed at the right time while keeping everything automated and consistent. Preview mode shows you what would happen during a sync without making any changes to Active Directory. It's a great way to validate your setup before going live. Once enabled, Connect to AD runs automatically on the schedule you choose. Each run reads employee data from UKG, determines the required actions, applies all field and group mappings, and sends notifications. Every change is logged, including attribute updates and group additions or removals. Now, let's take a moment to review the results in Active Directory. Here, we can see the user accounts that were created. If we open a user record, we can review key attributes such as name, department, job title, manager, and group membership. One more thing to review. These user accounts have been disabled and moved to the Disabled Users OU because they were terminated in UKG. They have been properly deprovisioned. This confirms that provisioning, updates, and deprovisioning are working as expected. That wraps up the Connect to AD demo. From here, you can refine your rules and mappings and move into production scheduling. For additional help, please visit our Help Center. Thanks for taking the time to walk through this demo.